intersection.
As a crow flies, or as the road goes?
These are, the gray and white are the existing. So those are, what?
Like, are you asking?
Right. How much do the roads meander between the intersection points? Is this roughly?
So the gray and the white are pretty accurate. And
For crow flies or road distance? So like if I do, I'm sorry, I don't mean to confuse you, I just think it's really, really interesting, and I don't have an answer. So this is such cool stuff.
You'll see when we show our roads that the roads actually do look.
Okay, I'll wait.
Better than the roads.
Information will be forthcoming. That's fine.
So the resolution of your straight lines is fine enough that pretty closely approximates the actual.
There are more roads than that because
Well, yeah.
we're
Pretty
it
closely
down to something
approximates the
abstract.
path of the roads that you
Yes.
care about.
But yes.
Okay. I guess we'll know when we see. Hopefully you'll have no of that.
Okay, so we are with Petare. We titled our presentation "Viados los Barrios," which is meshing the barrios, which is basically a Spanish for neighborhood. So we got table of contents. We're gonna introduce you to the arrival city and suggest some things about migration. Then we're gonna give you a little bit of history with past and present. Then we're gonna give you a little bit of site orientation, the mapping things that we did, and then move on to the indexing. And then we're going to show you some case studies that we did on a specific neighborhood. And then we're going to layer that all together, show you the meshing, and then we're going to give you our conclusion. Our town that we focused on was Petare, which is a suburb of Caracas, which is the capital of Venezuela. So we've got people migrating from a lot from Europe and and Africa, but mainly from, or also from these three, Colombia, Brazil, and Guyana. The massive migration was spurred by the current oil boom that's going on right now. Once the migrants arrived, though, there's a lack of infrastructure there, so it limits the distance that they can travel to work. And in addition, there's also very little job opportunities to begin with outside of the oil boom, and it makes it difficult to find a job in the first place. So without the success of new jobs, many migrants fail to make enough money to progress out of the slums and favelas, which makes the population very stagnant. So some of our, the past and present, Petare initially was a farming community. It dwindled when Caracas started to phase toward the rapid urbanization from the oil industry. The production of the agriculture industry produced a food shortage because obviously they were starting to use the agricultural land for housing population. This caused them to have to import the large majority of their food, which also that inflated the food prices for obvious reasons. The combination of a lack of job opportunity and a high cost of food and basic needs resulted in the necessity for expansion of Petare due to the stagnation of the population because they're not moving there because they can't. Some of the main issues that we're concerned with are the lack of infrastructure, the economic crisis, the high rate of violence, and a severe lack of job diversity outside the oil industry, and very few textiles, I believe. An example of the issues regarding the infrastructure is a severe absence of waste removal because there aren't, well, not only are there not streets, but if we could get trash trucks in there, where would we put the trash? There's nowhere to put it. So the unstable infrastructure compounded with the severe economic crisis involving a lack of job availability and diversity is directly proportional to exports. So if there's no exports, there's no jobs. And there will be, yeah, go ahead.
So here we're going from the metropolitan of Caracas on the top image, and we're zoning in on the eastern side, which is a region labeled as Petare, Venezuela. It's a collection of barrios, neighborhoods, of favelas that are clustered together. And you can see that the population of Caracas is around 3 million, and the population of Petare is around 1 million. And these are rough estimates because it's hard to get an exact number. But for the square area of the region, Petare is much more dense than Caracas in general, and computes to 50,000 people per square kilometer living there, which is extreme.
Alright, so the transportation network, so we're showing the multiple layers of the different road types, which create densities where access is available and voids where it is not. This is a direct translation to the issues with regard to infrastructure and civil services. For example, the high density and unorganized road networks do not receive the proper waste management that Liz was talking about earlier, and services they require, such as police. It's just really difficult to get to those really dense areas. The program areas show how the barrios are built around the other program sites. It shows that the programs in Petare are very cellular based. This can cause issues when commuting because the transportation networks are insufficient. The catalog of programs in Petare show that there is a lack of variety of jobs and resources in the area. So you can see on each of these highlighted areas shows a different kind of program, and there's not very much other than the educational and the factories that are around the area. So this diagram shows the rivers and streams in Petare with regard to their water catchment and floodplains. This also ties in with the slope grades and soil types because the areas with a large slope grade and water runoff will have a higher chance for mudslides. And so later we'll see how the slope grades of Petare are really steep, and that's really important to look at, especially with this diagram and the soil type, which is clay, and so mudslides are a big concern. Alright, the green space shows the path of expansion that Petare is taking. The lack of green space shows high density of development areas and depicts a lack of buildable space within Petare. Additionally, the depicted green space shows the forested and the most probable course for development. So we can see that Petare, like where it's expanding based on the forested areas. Those come from the west and northeast.
So here we have three topographical analyses. The first is an elevation with a gradient from black to red from height. The average elevation is 900 meters above sea level, and the step change is 300 meters. So there's a dramatic elevation increase, and that's one of the main driving factors of planning urbanizations. And the second diagram shows the slope with the dark blue to light blue representing slopes of 0 to 20 degrees, and then the yellow to dark orange representing 20 to 45 degrees. So these are extremely steep slopes in the yellow and orange, given that the steepest road in the world is around 20 degrees and driving straight up the hill. So developing road systems in the steep slope diagram shows a solar radiation exposure, which correlates to the other two in the topography, given that the lowest elevation areas and have the steepest slope on the river valleys, and areas carved out by water catchment and water runoff. And so all three of these directly correlate to areas where development is problematic in steep slope, high elevation, and low sun exposure. Here we have the dangerous slopes of 20 degrees and higher, highlighted in red, and you can see the urban developments tend to avoid the slopes over 20 degrees. And then here we're indexing a density web based on the density and porosity of built construction. And so you can see in the really dense dark gray areas, those are your barrio or favela areas where the slums and poor residential housing occur. And then in the areas in between, you can see the area of the voids represents a more higher porosity and a greater distance and spacing between the connections there. And then here we have the connectivity of the existing road network structure. And this existing route structure is representing, like we were saying earlier, with road intersections represented as nodes, and then connecting them based on a radius. And this was done computationally and then refined and edited where if a connection was made where it didn't actually exist because there was a river bounding it, and even though the two intersections were close, there was no road connecting them, then we deleted those connections. So it was refined. And then you can see on the western side where it starts to go to Caracas, you can see the angles of the connections become more orthogonal and more organized in a more of a grid structure. And then as you get into Petare, you have this very unorganized clustering of connections that's very representational of the topography, where the elevation rises, the road networks are less organized, and it becomes more problematic for traveling about.
Okay, so this, from here, we're gonna work towards the neighborhood to try and get some information that we can really reach with just doing research in Petare. And so we're gonna focus on a neighborhood called Barrio La Cruz. And the reason why we chose this one was because it gave us variations in porosity. So a lot of Petare, as you can see, some of it is a lot more dense and some of it is less dense and a little bit more organized. So choosing this neighborhood gave us a variation and an understanding of the research, not only in this neighborhood, but also the understanding of Petare themselves. So this is Barrio La Cruz, which is kind of centered in Petare, a little bit south of the main factory area. The area of it is 0.62 kilometers, and it is mainly residential. There's not very many factories or industry that is created in this area. The households, there are 5,619, and based off of that, we gave an estimate of 4 people per household. So 2 parents and then 2 children, which is 22,500 people. And from here, we did the steps in elevation, and the more easterly you go, the higher the elevation gets, which is also interesting because it gets less dense the more east you go as well. And from here we did different grid systems and then took sections of those grid systems, understanding the porosity that is kind of shown within these different 4 quadrants that we show in the neighborhood. So this is our first density sample within Barrio La Cruz. And the total area is 105,000 square meters, and then the building area is approximately 52,000 square meters. So the density of that is basically 50% density of it is building, and the rest is just roads. So, or roads or also green spaces. So given the quadrants of roads and alleyways, it kind of leaves no room for any sort of building or open space for kind of green spaces or things of that sort. And then the next one is the second quadrant, and the total area is 156 square meters, and the building area is 83,000 square meters. And the density of this is 53, and the slope is also just as high, if not also higher, in some of the denser areas. And the issue with this is just the same as the one before. The more dense, the more alleyways, the more traffic for road areas or any sort of transportation for services such as waste management and also industries for those to create job areas. And then the third one, as you can tell, there gets to be more open space and a little bit more room, breathing room between some of the communities. And the total area is 194,375 square meters. And then the building area is approximately 53,000 square meters. And then the density drops down almost by half with 27%. And so this was really interesting to see. Basically, half of the neighborhood is extremely dense and very high population as far as households go. And then the other half of it gets a lot less dense. And it creates more of a porosity based on the diagram that we created on the left-hand side. And availability for not only movement of roads and movement of transportation and people, but also a little bit more of comfortable breathing room for living. And then this is the fourth sample for density, which is 171,000 square meters, and the building area is 41,000. And then the density is a little bit less than the last one, and it's by 24%. So the nice thing about this one is that even though it is high in elevation, the porosity of it is something that is more suitable for any kind of development or things of that sort, and creation of factories. And you can tell that this kind of trails off into the end of the Petare area and is not nearly as developed, but it's not as dense, and it doesn't create nearly as much of havoc or issues as far as households and living situations go. And then from here, based on some measurements and also grasshopper work, we did water catchment for the rooftops within the building areas of the neighborhood. And the main reason why we chose to do neighborhood is because doing this in all of Petare would have taken us several weeks. So we did this because our main focus we want to do is kind of bring the past back to the present and also possibly the future. The reason being because they don't have nearly as much of a healthy economy or also agriculture, which is what they definitely strive for in the past. So the lighter blue shows the lesser roof catchment areas and areas with a little bit less water, and then the dark blue shows greater catchment areas. And the annual rainfall for most of this area of Caracas and Venezuela is 91 centimeters. And then the rooftop area shown here is 231 square meters, and then the annual collection based off all of that is 55 million gallons. So the great thing about this is there is a lot of issues as far as water runoff and things of that sort, and polluted water, especially in denser areas. And this gives us the ability to not only treat the water and possibly dispense it to families, but also create an area for aggregation and also agriculture as far as plantation and community gardens go. And so based off of this, going kind of back to the past where they grew coffee and also cocoa, we wanted to kind of focus on that and sort of see where that takes us in our research. And so for coffee, it takes about 130 to 260 gallons per acre per year in order to grow coffee successfully. And per each plant, it's 4 gallons per plant in order for it to grow to its full maturity, given its germination time and things of that sort. And then from there, for every single acre that you can grow coffee, it's 500 to 700 plants per acre. And based off of that acre, you can grow and produce about 900 to 1,300 kilograms of coffee. So that doesn't only allow for creating jobs for these people that are jobless or the economy, but also allows for possible export in the future, which could also help grow the economy of Venezuela. And then as far as cocoa goes, it's about 110 to plants per acre that can be produced is about 320 to 800 plants. And given some of the research that was done, that's a pretty wide gap as far as plants, but local plants can definitely vary in size because they are actually kind of tree-like. And then per each plant, it's about 3 gallons of water per plant as well, for maturation and also germination time. And then from here, you can reduce about 360 to 900 kilograms of cocoa beans per year.
Okay, zooming back out to the Petare view, when we add our layers up from the existing landscape, we added the developed land currently, and then the non-buildable slopes and the floodplains to create our area of intervention. And if you go to the next slide. We started subtracting areas of which we cannot build on right now by first getting rid of the developed land already. And then from there, we subtracted the non-buildable slopes, which are greater than 25%. And then from there, we subtracted the floodplains from the water runoff, which gave us the centralized area of our proposed expansion in the center, linking the two barrio regions on the west and the east. And from there, we overlaid the existing connectivity of the city in order to match it up as best as possible by placing center nodes in the regions that were found to get a proposed connectivity in which we applied an additional stream between the two together. And this area that was given here is going to be applied in a way to provide for agriculture within the area by having either rooftop gardens or centralized gardening areas.
So in conclusion, there are three main issues that we wanted to address that appeared to us. Those were the lack of agriculture based on the growth of the dense urban fabric, the underutilization of water due to root catchment, water runoff, that sort of thing, which can greatly aid in the introduction of community agricultural systems. And the third is the lack of connectivity that was created due to the rapid urban growth was unsuccessful in the main part of Petare because of the massive disconnects. So our prototypes, our suggested prototypes for the solution can be condensed into three main parts. Utilizing the rooftops in the dense urban fabric, rainwater catchment and storage that we can use to irrigate the agriculture, which will create jobs, infrastructure, export, economy. Implementing the community agriculture systems, again, to create jobs and so forth. And lastly, to bring connectivity network full circle by bridging gaps between and within the existing networks and new additions.